Planet Reddit. Today's story is...
My sister wants me to sleep with her fiancé as a wedding gift, and when I refused, she offered me $5,000. What I did next changed everything. My older sister, Maria, is getting married in a week to Matthew, her boyfriend since university. Maria is 5 years older than me, so when she started going out with Matthew and bringing him home, I was still at secondary school. Back then, I thought Matthew was great, probably because he was younger and I admired him in some way. I saw him as a kind of older brother, someone who made my sister happy and was there to support her. That was my perspective, and I was genuinely happy for Maria because he seemed like a good match for her. However, reflecting now, I realized that Matthew did not treat me like a little sister. He was always overly friendly with me, like those people who seem to have ulterior motives. It's hard to put into words, but you know those men in the family who make you feel uncomfortable? The ones who seem to flirt, or who look at you in a way that makes you want to turn away. That's how Matthew acted with me. At first I didn't even notice it. I thought he was just being very kind, or maybe he was just paying more attention to me than most. It didn't occur to me that his actions could be anything more than innocent. As I grew older, I started to pay more attention to the small details. He wasn't just being nice, there was something strange about his behavior towards me. It started to make me feel uncomfortable because he wasn't just anyone, he was my sister's boyfriend. I remember one specific incident when Maria organized a party at our house while our parents were away. It was a night full of music, laughter, and drinks. Maria even encouraged me to join in the fun. In fact, it was my first time drinking, and like most beginners, I ended up drinking much more than I could handle. Before I knew it, everything was spinning and the environment seemed to be moving. I decided the best thing would be to go to my room, hoping that the discomfort would pass if I got some sleep. As I was staggering along the corridor, trying to keep my balance, Matthew suddenly appeared. He saw that I wasn't well and insisted on helping me to my room. I told him I was fine and could get there myself, but he insisted repeatedly. Finally, he ended up accompanying me to my room. What happened next is a bit hazy in my memory. I remember finally getting to my room, waiting for him to leave so I could close the door and get some rest. But Matthew wouldn't leave. Even though I asked him to go, he stayed there, as if he had no intention of leaving. He continued to hold me, running his hands through my hair, whispering in my ear. I don't remember exactly what he was saying to me, but it wasn't appropriate. I was just thinking about how much I wanted him to stop, and how uncomfortable I felt with the whole situation. He even tried to push me towards my bed, and every time I moved his hands away, he tried again. Fortunately, before the situation got any worse, Maria came into the room. She saw us and told Matthew to leave immediately. You can't imagine the relief I felt when he finally left. Then she helped me to lie down, and I was finally able to rest. The next morning, when I woke up and started to remember what had happened, I knew I had to talk to Maria about it. I expected her to be angry, especially with Matthew, but surprisingly she wasn't. She acted as if it hadn't been a big deal. She told me that Matthew had also been drunk and that his behavior towards me had not been intentional. Then she said something that I will never forget. She said that since my sister and I looked so much alike, Matthew had probably confused me with her. Maria also made me promise not to tell our parents. She said it would only cause problems and wasn't worth it. When I protested, she made me feel like I was exaggerating, that I was making a drama out of something that hadn't happened the way she was telling it. In the end, I didn't say anything because I had also been drinking and maybe I had misinterpreted everything. But after that night, I couldn't see Matthew in the same way. Whether consciously or unconsciously, I began to avoid him. Whenever he came to visit, I made sure we were never alone in the same room. If he tried to hug me, I would pull away or make up some excuse to leave. I no longer felt safe around him. As the years went by, as I grew up and moved away, my interactions with Maria and Matthew naturally became less frequent. Life distances you from some people, but I think a part of me also intentionally moved away. Those uncomfortable memories of Matthew remained in my mind, but I buried them, refusing to think about them too much. It was easier to ignore everything and move on with my life. Anyway, now Maria is going to marry Matthew. I would like to be happy for my sister, but I think it's a terrible decision. My mother has been helping Maria plan her wedding for months, and she has even offered me the role of bridesmaid, which I accepted because she is my sister. Maria has been talking about her wedding for as long as I can remember, and despite my opinion of Matthew, he is doing everything he can to make it happen. He has agreed to all of her plans, no matter how extravagant, and he is covering most of the wedding expenses, as our parents don't have much left in the savings account for this event. At least that's fine with me. As her maid of honor, I have noticed that Maria has made certain unreasonable requests throughout the wedding planning process. At first, I attributed it to the normal stress of a bride. She was under a lot of pressure, and I wanted to be understanding. But over time, her requests began to seem less about the wedding and more about controlling me. For example, she asked me to cut my hair, saying she didn't want me to stand out next to her on her big day, although I didn't do it. She also insisted that I wear a long-sleeve dress, while all the other bridesmaids would wear sleeveless dresses, and asked me to cover up more. At one point, she even suggested that I dye my hair from blonde to brown because we look so much alike, it could be confusing. What's worse is that she has even made comments about my body. I have always exercised regularly and taken care of myself, but lately, Maria has been pressuring me to eat more and skip my workouts. She has told me directly that she doesn't want me to look better than her at their wedding, as my figure makes her feel insecure. Although I have agreed to wear the dress she wants and to do everything possible to please her, I have had to set limits on some of her other demands. I told her that I was not going to cut my hair, diet, or change my lifestyle just to make her feel better about herself. For me, these requests are unreasonable and unfair. As expected, Maria did not take my refusal well. She has been passive-aggressive towards me ever since. Anyway, this week is her bachelorette party. Yesterday, Maria contacted me to see if we could meet for lunch. I assumed it would be about the wedding, maybe some last-minute detail, or an update on one of her bridesmaids. I didn't think much of it and agreed. But I could never have prepared myself for what she was about to tell me. She told me that her fiancé, Matthew, had always been in love with me. At first, I thought I must have heard her wrong, but no, she repeated it, explaining that she had always known. She went on to say that Matthew had confessed to her that from the first moment he saw me, he had been attracted to me. I was completely horrified to hear this, because you know my opinion of Matthew. And even if he wasn't with my sister, I couldn't see it any other way. There's also an important detail. When he first saw me, I was a minor. How could an adult man, who was already going out with my sister, feel that way about his younger sister? It was nauseating just thinking about it, but Maria went on to explain how, over the years, his supposed infatuation had never disappeared. She said it wasn't a big deal because she hadn't acted on it, but she admitted that he had told her that he still thought about me to this day. Hearing all this made me feel even more uncomfortable. I didn't understand why Maria was telling me this and why she was still planning a wedding with such a man. I asked her directly why she was sharing these details with me. I didn't want to know anything about her fiancé. However, I told her that if she wanted any advice or support on this, I would be happy to help her. My answer would be, cancel the wedding now, as soon as possible. But Maria was not only going to go ahead with the wedding, but according to her, as she had never asked me for anything in her whole life, now she wanted to ask me for this one priceless gift. She even presented it as something she could give him as a wedding present. Maria looked me in the eye and told me she wanted me to spend a night with her fiancé. When you hear something like that, you look for signs on the other person's face, hoping to discover that it's all a joke, but my sister was completely serious when she said it. She even seemed a little sad, which makes perfect sense. My own sister was asking me to sleep with the man she is about to marry. This wasn't just wrong, it was terrifying. I wasn't going to sleep with my sister's fiancé, let alone someone like Matthew. She explained that Matthew had decided that he didn't even want a traditional stag night with strippers like other men. According to her, he had begged her for only one thing, one night with me, which, according to my sister, wasn't such a terrible thing. She told me that Matthew sleeping with me was much better than strippers because it would help him get me out of his system and start the marriage without any lingering feelings. I asked her at what point she thought telling me this would be a good idea, and even worse, how she could still be thinking of marrying a man like that. I asked her why she wanted to be with a man who openly admitted that he was in love with his younger sister. I told her that if she had even the slightest respect for herself, she should leave Matthew now while there was still time. She wouldn't even lose much money on the wedding because he had paid for most of it. But instead of listening to reason, Maria started to defend him. She said he wasn't a bad person for having feelings for me and tried to convince me that it was completely normal for older men to sometimes feel that way about younger women. She said it all came down to biology at the end of the day. He was trying to convince me that this behavior was somehow very normalized, trying to make me believe that it was no big deal. Maybe that's the case in other cultures, but not in mine. Maria went on to say that Matthew was an incredible partner in all other respects. She described him as loving and understanding, and highlighted how he was paying for most of the wedding expenses, not complaining about anything she asked for, but to me that didn't justify anything. It's as if the money gave him permission to sleep with me, which was even more repulsive. Then she put all the pressure on me. She told me that what Matthew was asking for wasn't really unreasonable, and that if I didn't agree, it would put their whole relationship at risk. In other words, Matthew would be upset with her for not being able to sleep with me. According to Maria, asking me to sleep with him was just a small thing in the big picture, something that would make him happy forever, and then they could start their marriage happily. In fact, she said that if he really loved her, he should be able to do this for her as her sister. And if all that wasn't disgusting enough, she even tried to justify it by pointing out that, since she was his sister, she wouldn't even feel jealous after he and I slept together. This person sitting in front of me, so casually suggesting something so twisted, couldn't be my sister. Maria didn't just sound delusional, she sounded completely out of her mind. My own sister was sitting in front of me, willingly trying to offer me her fiancé and defending her actions as if they were completely normal. It was a sleep with my fiancé, it's okay, it's all in the family situation, and she couldn't see how terrible it all was. I understand that the pressure and anxiety of the wedding can have a negative effect, but this was beyond the normal levels. Maybe it was time to seek professional help. I looked her straight in the eye and told her that she could consider her marriage finished before it had even begun. I made it clear to her that I wanted absolutely nothing to do with her, with Matthew, and with this wedding. I also informed her that I was going to expose both her and her fiancé in front of everyone for making such an inappropriate request of me. On hearing this, Maria tried to argue with me, but I was so furious that I got up and left immediately. As she has not been able to convince me, and she knows she won't because I have made it very clear, her attempt now is to send me messages so that I don't tell anyone. She knows exactly what will happen if I tell our parents or anyone else the truth. Honestly, I can't stop thinking about what she's getting herself into. I mean, imagine marrying someone like Matthew, a man who has been lusting after your younger sister for years, a man who felt so bold and entitled that he not only confessed his inappropriate infatuation to his fiancée, but also convinced her to ask her own sister to sleep with him as a sickly wedding gift. Just thinking about it gives me chills. My reasoning at this point is that I don't want to be in the middle of a drama by revealing what he has asked me to do. I just want to skip the wedding and never see them again. But at the same time, I know what this wedding will do to my sister if she goes through with it. That marriage is doomed, and I could prevent it. So I don't know if I should just stay out of the middle of this problem. That's my question and the reason why I'm here. Update 1. I can't believe I'm getting so many responses to my post in just a few hours. My inbox is filled up with hundreds of direct messages, and to all the unknown men contacting me, please stop. I'm already upset enough, and the last thing I need right now is to deal with your inappropriate messages. That said, I also want to acknowledge the positive side of the messages I have received. Not all of them have been bad. My sister is about to willingly enter into a marriage with a man who has openly admitted to having a disturbing and inappropriate attraction to me. She is inviting a problematic person into our family, and she is defending him while she does so. That's not just disturbing, it's dangerous. And it's clear to me now that Matthew must be exposed for the person he really is. If I don't speak out about his inappropriate behavior, who will? My sister is unwilling or unable, so I am her only hope. I keep thinking about what could happen if he really becomes part of our family. What if he turns his attention to someone else, maybe one of my younger cousins or some other relative who might not know how to recognize or deal with this kind of behavior? I shudder to think what this man is capable of doing if no one holds him accountable. He has already crossed the line with me. What's to stop him from doing it again with someone else? To all those who have encouraged me to seek therapy, I want to thank you for that too. You are right. Therapy can help to resolve some things. But that is something I have been doing for some years now. For a while, I ignored it. I kept it in some corner of my mind and I tried to act as if it didn't matter. But when I realized that it was affecting me, it was very wise of me to ask for help. Update 2. It's been 3 days since my last update. My sister has tried again to convince me to accept his disgusting request. And as if things couldn't get any worse, she has now stooped so low as to offer me money. Yes, real money, as if money would make me forget that Matthew is disgusting. Specifically $5,000, which I suppose is money that Matthew himself has offered to give me because I don't see that my sister has that kind of money so easily available. Not only has she lost her whole personality because of this man, now she is also trying to become my intermediary. Today I decided that enough was enough. I couldn't keep quiet any longer. I knew I had more than enough evidence against Maria and Matthew to prove what was going on. I had saved all their messages, voice recordings, and everything else they had sent me in their attempts to pressure me into accepting. With all that in my possession, I decided it was time to involve my family. I called a family meeting at my house, where my parents, grandparents, and some of our cousins were invited. I didn't tell Maria, and obviously I didn't invite Matthew. When they all arrived, I sat them down and told them I had something very serious to share. I wanted everyone to be focused on what I was going to say, because before I started talking they were all chatting and laughing. And what was coming wasn't something to laugh about. I told them how Maria had been pressuring me to sleep with Matthew, her future husband. I showed them the screenshots of our conversations in which she begged me, tried to make me feel guilty, and even offered me money to do it. I also played them the voice messages she had sent me, with Maria's own voice saying all these things. I also told everyone about how Matthew had apparently been in love with me for years, even when he was a minor. I explained to them how Maria knew about his feelings and still decided to stay with him. And finally, I confessed what had happened that night at the party. I told them how Matthew tried to take advantage of me when I was affected by alcohol and vulnerable, how he refused to leave my room, how he hugged me, touched me, and his inappropriate rubbing. I told them everything, no matter how I felt. My father was the angriest of all. He was red with rage, and my mom seemed furious too, although she didn't show it as much. My grandparents just remained silent, but my grandmother hugged me, while my cousins seemed not to know what to say or what to do. I know that many of you were worried that my family might not believe me. Believe me, I had the same fears. But I had so much evidence, so they all believed me without asking any questions. With the messages and audios, it was enough to believe what happened a few years ago, even though I had no proof of that. They didn't doubt a single word I said. My parents also came over, gave me a big hug, and told me I had done the right thing by telling them. I don't know if I like to admit it in public, but I burst into tears while my mom held me, along with my grandmother. My dad, who is sometimes more reserved with his emotions, looked like he was about to burst into tears. But he also seemed ready to explode with anger. He kept saying, "How dare that man touch my daughter?" My grandfather said he was ready to go to Matthew's house and confront him. He said he didn't care if Matthew was younger, stronger, or whatever. An older man like him could still stand up to someone like Matthew. My dad agreed with him, and for a moment, the two of them seemed so determined that it looked like they were planning a battle strategy. I am not in favor of violence. I want to make that clear. I think Matthew should be brought to justice. But somehow, I felt protected by them. Even the cousins were ready to join my father and grandfather. Tonight, my mom and some of my cousins stayed with me at my house to keep me company and make sure I felt safe. Meanwhile, my dad and my grandfather went to Maria and Matthew's house to confront them directly. But they went alone because if more people went, they thought it might trigger an uncontrollable situation. I'm a bit nervous about what's going to happen. I don't know how Maria is going to react, and I don't know how my father and my grandfather are going to react. I'm afraid Matthew will make them angry, and it will end very badly. Not for Matthew's sake, but for theirs. You can't take the law into your own hands, at least not here. As for Maria, I really hope for her own sake that she makes the right decision and stays away from Matthew. It's not too late for her to see the truth and save herself from what would be an absolutely terrifying marriage. As angry and hurt as I am by what she has done, I still want the best for her. Update 3. First of all, let me tell you what happened the night my dad and my granddad confronted Matthew and Maria. When they arrived at their house, they expected Matthew to at least deny everything. But, to their total surprise and disgust, Matthew admitted without any shame that he had feelings for me. He didn't confess absolutely everything, like the money, but he did say that he thought about open relationships and that he didn't see anything wrong with exploring them since I was older. However, he denied what happened that night when I wasn't. To make things even worse, which was what I feared, he said that they couldn't understand it because they were from a different generation. My dad, who was already boiling with rage, completely lost control at that moment. He punched Matthew right in the face. My grandfather didn't even try to stop him because at that moment, everyone knew that Matthew deserved it. Meanwhile, Maria was trying to defend her partner. She was very embarrassed that everyone had found out about her request to me. She kept telling my dad that she couldn't believe I had revealed everything to the family, but she didn't say anything to Matthew, which was making things worse. My dad then turned to her to give her his opinion on the matter. He told her how disappointed he was, how upset he felt that she could even think of asking me, her own sister, for something so horrible. And he told her that he expected more from her, like having canceled the wedding when all this came up. And yes, they made it clear to her with my grandfather that they expected her to do the right thing and not marry Matthew. But Maria was completely focused on her wedding, so she began to defend her fiancé in order to officially become his wife. She told them straight out that she couldn't live without Matthew, and that if it came down to choosing between him and her family, she would choose him. My dad and my granddad argued with her a bit more, trying to make her understand, but it was like talking to a brick wall. Maria was completely blinded by the distorted idea of love she had for this man. That at this point he was just observing, and after the blow, he had no more modern opinions about relationships. In the end, they realized that there was no way to get through to her, so they left after telling her that they no longer wanted anything to do with her either. Since that night, the decision has been unanimous on our family side. No one, not a single person, will attend her wedding. We are all disgusted with Matthew and absolutely horrified by Maria's actions and decisions. My parents, grandparents, and cousins are all on my side. They believe me, they support me, and they want nothing to do with them. Of course, Maria contacted me afterwards, angrily blaming me for ruining her wedding. I've had enough of her, and I don't know how she can turn things around here and make me feel guilty. At this point, I didn't even waste time arguing and just blocked her. I don't know what will happen with her wedding. I may seem naive, but I still hope that she will cancel everything at the last minute. It's more of a hope for her own sake, but if she can't protect herself, then marrying that man is what she deserves. Maybe I'll have an update after the wedding. Whether it's good or bad now depends on her. Update 4. We, that is, my family and I, did everything we could to make her realize the mistake she was making and stop the wedding. But no, she got married, and now she will have to live with the consequences of that decision. And no one in the family attended. And to make matters even worse for Maria, even some bridesmaids also skipped the wedding after finding out. As far as we know, only a few friends who didn't find out or didn't care attended, plus Matthew's family, with whom the same thing could have happened. I would like to say that this is the end of my story, that Maria will have a happy marriage, but I have a feeling that sooner or later I will have to return with another update. I don't know if soon or after a few years. Update 5. 4 years later is a long time to return with an update, but I always knew this day would come. I thought it would come with the end of Maria's marriage, but that is far from over. And she has many more warning signs in front of her than she had before she got married. But she is still madly in love with him and will follow him to the end. In the last few months or year, several complaints were filed against Matthew for exactly the same thing he tried with me. Some complaints are just attempts from people who have been able to escape him, and others have not been so lucky. His trial ended a few weeks ago, and he has been given 16 years in prison with no possibility of parole. My mother has been in touch with her because Matthew's case is well known here, and I even know some of the victims, although I am not close to them and have never spoken to them. My mother and the rest of the family have not spoken to my sister since the last time, but my mother thought that this was the moment to contact her as a way of reaching out to her so that she could escape from that situation. But she hasn't done it and has decided to continue with him despite everything that has come to light. This is absolutely worse than what had happened before, and yet she continues to defend her husband and leave her family aside. I can't imagine how bad one must be mentally to reach this point, but my sister needs a lot of help that she refuses to receive. I guess my story will be one without an ending, where people can't see that they have made a mistake and will live with that their whole lives. My sister plans to follow Matthew to the end if necessary, which is where all my family believes he should be.